The Excelsior U8, known locally as Wilf, has now been on the road for about a year. It's done about 1,000 miles and had reasonable success. Its latest update has been to fit a 4-speed gearbox, which should help it no end. The gearbox arrangement, due to the wonders of Villiers, is from an AT, a Villiers AT, which is a 197 engine, built around the same period as this one, around about the 56 to 59 period, and with a little bit of jiggery pokery, it'll fit on the existing crankcase of the smaller 30C 150 unit. However, there are some little tricks and snags. The standard S19 Villiers carburetor is retained, but you have to watch out. To use this particular carburetor, which is comes as standard, you will find that on the top of the AT gearbox there is no relief ground out in the top of the gearbox to allow for the standard float chamber to fit in. What I found when I didn't think I had a problem, in fact, but what I found is when I went to mount the carburetor, I couldn't get it vertical. It was about 30 degrees off vertical because the nut on the bottom of the float chamber was actually catching the casting on the top of the AT gearbox. I didn't particularly want to fit an alternative carburetor. In fact, I have done some preliminary investigations using a Del Auto carburetor, which has a very much shallower float chamber, and that just would fly in. It wouldn't make any difference whatsoever, but I didn't want to detract from its original arrangement. So two things I did. I very carefully eased a little bit of the alloy casting off the top of the gearbox. Now when you see these particular castings, I don't think they're that thick in terms of the amount of meat on them, so I was really literally scratching the surface on that. So I took a little bit off, but I didn't go wild on it. However, what I did do, I looked at the float chamber itself on the carburetor, and there's quite a bit of latitude on that. So what I did, with the aid of my trusty Myford lathe, I actually skimmed about roughly about 3 millimeters off the total length of the float chamber. Then what I did, I managed to take about 1 millimeter off the securing nut that goes on the bottom of the float chamber, and I had to take about 2 threads off the main jet carrier, which is in the centre of the carburetor. And with the result of doing that, and again you've got to go very cautiously, the carburetor fits in nicely without any detrimental effect on carburetor performance, because really you're not altering the fuel level in any way, you're just reducing the capacity of the float chamber very slightly. Anyway, it seems to run very nicely, it doesn't leak, and I'm quite pleased. With the clutch. The AT clutch and the 30C clutch are very similar. The plates, the springs and everything like that are in fact the same, but the main driven plate, which in front of you is the original 30C 3-speed unit, you'll see the boss in the centre is in fact not as deep as required on the AT, so you must have the AT equivalent of this particular plate. Whilst talking about the clutch, another thing I've noticed is the push rod assembly is different on the AD from the original 3C. Two main things really is the rod itself is a slightly bigger diameter on the 3-speed gearbox, so you can't reuse that on an 8E. So if you are purchasing an 8E gearbox from somebody, ask them if they've got the push rods as well. The clutch operating system is different to the 3-speed. You can see what is probably a fairly standard arrangement with a clutch operating arm on the top with its adjuster, but the device that operates on the actual push rod on this side is quite different from the 3-speed gearbox and is in fact a bit fiddly. Can't really see it too much, but the bottom of the clutch actuating arm has like a two-fingered claw which you can just about see, and that goes either side of a small cylindrical cartridge type assembly that goes in the end of the main shaft. Within that cartridge is in fact a ball bearing which impacts on the end of the clutch push rod at this end, and you see the small hexagon bolt in the centre. Now that screws in and out, and that is in fact a means of adjusting the clearances. However, once you set that to the book, which I think it says allow a 1/16 of an inch or something clearance at the cable, once you've set that, really all you do after that is just adjust the cable length. You can see the blanking plate's been replaced on the end of the gearbox, and incidentally this end portion of the gearbox, what you can see is you can see the actual joint between the next part of the casting. Within there you have the gear change mechanism, and that is basically runs dry or lightly oiled. There is no oil inside of there other than what might leak through the gearbox eventually, and it's not very waterproof either, so if you the trial lads tell me they make certain there's drain holes in the bottom of the casting to let the water out. The standard gearbox sprocket for the 30C as fitted to the Excelsior U8 is a 16-tooth sprocket. However, the main shaft on the 8E normally takes 15-tooth or 17-tooth. What I have done is fitted the 15-tooth sprocket, and although it will slightly lower the gears, I think that may well be beneficial, because typically the top gear on the original 3-speed gearbox tends to be a bit on the high side. The other slight modifications I had to do, the gearbox was bought through an ad in the Vintage Motorcycle Club magazine, and of course I didn't have a kickstart pedal or a gear change pedal. Now the gear change pedal from the 3-speed gearbox will not fit the Albion gearbox as fitted to the 8E. However, as a matter of interest, Royal Enfield fitted a very similar gearbox on their lightweights, I believe.